George Pickens has been one of the most electric wide receivers in the past few seasons for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In the last few weeks, he has been going crazy in the NFL, and in this video, we will be breaking down why George Pickens will be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL next season. But before we get into why I believe George Pickens will be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL next season, please subscribe for more Steelers content. Coming off of 2 electrifying performances against the Bengals and the Seahawks, George Pickens racked up 11 receptions for 326 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns that came against the Bengals, where Pickens had 4 receptions for $195. On the season, George Pickens has 63 receptions for 1,140 receiving yards, which is currently 12th overall in the NFL in receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns on the season. The first thing that shows me that next season George Pickens will be a top wide receiver in the NFL is when you look into NFL receiving leaders on this season. The 11 wide receivers ahead of George Pickens, 8 of those 11 have 30 or more receptions than Pickens, which is absolutely insane. And, you don't even look at the targets. I'm not even going into that. They had a lot more targets for sure than Pickens did. And just for him to be that close, or 12th overall in receiving yards with only 63 receptions on the season, it's just impeccable. With George Pickens having the 12th most receiving yards in the league and a decently lower number of receptions, that also gives Pickens a larger average yardage per reception than 10 out of the 11 wide receivers ahead of him in receiving yards, with an average yardage of 18.1 yards per reception. Outside of the statistical standpoint, another big reason why George Pickens will be a top 5 wide receiver next season is he has had to deal with so much change in so little time this season at times. With Kenny Pickett being in and out of the starting lineup for parts of the season, Pickens has had to adjust to building different chemistry with Mitch Trubisky and now Mason Rudolph for these last 2 games. And on top of all that, he had to deal with a terrible offensive coordinator for 10 games, Matt Canada, who did not use him efficiently and effectively at all. And since Eddie Faulkner has been the new offensive coordinator for the Steelers, he has been utilized way more. Adding on to him having to switch between quarterbacks, he's had to deal with Trubisky as quarterback, which I'm sorry, but Trubisky should not be an NFL quarterback. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. He should not be an NFL quarterback. He's throwing a ghost half the time that he's on the field. I'm sorry, but if you watch some of the games this season for the Steelers that he started, some of the passes, you're just wondering, who the heck is he throwing the ball to? I'm sorry, but Trubisky, come on, man. And with Trubisky starting, just to throw this in there, in the 4 games that Trubisky started for the Steelers this season, Pickens only had 10 receptions for 110 yards and 1 receiving touchdown, which...
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
...is just crazy considering this. In the first game that Mason Rudolph started against the Bengals, he broke that with 4 receptions, only 4 receptions for $195 and 2 receiving touchdowns. When you look at it, when you really look at it overall, George Pickens really just needs that QB that can get him the ball. I mean, now that we've seen that, I guess our offensive scheme hasn't really changed the most, but obviously the play calling has with Eddie Faulkner, and he's been better play caller obviously than Matt Canada was. It just comes down to now, can we have that consistent QB starting that can get him the ball? And Mason Rudolph has just signed, and the opportunity he's gotten, I'm just really excited to see what he's able to do next week against the Ravens. That is why I believe George Pickens will be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL next season. If you enjoyed this video on why I believe George Pickens will be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL next season, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you never miss an upload.